Hi, everybody. My name's Frank. I'm an alcoholic. And I hope some of you noticed I smiled from time to time. It was once reported to me that I looked like I was going to a hanging at these kinds of things. I'd like to thank Gloria and Jerry and for smoothing the way, and Connie for reading how it works, because that works for me too. It somehow calms me down the way a couple of stingers used to do, or whatever. Also for Bud and the other members of the committee for inviting me. I'm filled with scallops and peanut soup and anxiety. In that order, too. I think I was fine through the scallops. It used to be I would worry about these things for 6 months before. Now it's only about 10 or 20 minutes before my anxiety begins to mount, almost unknowingly, the way for an old neurotic these things happen. Suddenly you're in it. You wonder, well, what's happened? But I noticed there were little mounds of water where I'd moved my hand from, that kind of stuff. So I knew I was into feeling something. I hope I'm worthy of this moment here. I've spoken recently, and I've been very intense when I've spoken recently. I don't know where that came from. We were talking that a little at dinner, and it might be I'm at a different place in my own recovery. And with that caveat, it might be heavier than I would have wished for, because I've been very blessed by this. There are those too with grave mental and emotional disorders, and I feel I'm one of them, and still am to a large extent, but I've come so far that it's unbelievable. And if I can convey some of that sense, that how much I've been delivered by this program and by the support and the love I feel, as Jerry expressed very well, the love I feel in this room. I was always an alien. I never felt that connection, except with massive amounts of drinking. And even then, for only microseconds, and often I had to be in a blackout before I felt unconscious time and true rest, because there's always a breath on my neck. I don't know why that always was thus, but it was. I come from a family with emotional disorders, so I'm not the first of my kind. I'm happy to report. It may be congenital or whatever, but the family, in my judgment, I was one of those people. I hear in other stories too. I felt my family were crushed by life. That they didn't really have whatever the spirit was, or the energy, or they didn't do anything I approved of, I think, is what I feel. I scorn them at a very basic level, I'm sad to report. But if they liked blue, I wanted red. If they were Democrats, I was a Republican. If they spoke that way, I spoke this way. I had an urge to be other, to be different, to be distinguished from that. I think it's Carl Jung, who says that within each neuroses are the seeds of new growth. And I was the new growth. Because I think to a large extent, they were trapped by not having access. There was no alcoholism per se in the family. They just sat there, succumbed, I believed, by life. Life had no bit of merriment or whatever. And I sat there with them for a long period of my life, detesting it. I was born in a mental hospital, so things weren't going to get better for a long time either. So I knew what pathology was about. I knew how to be very sensitive to your environment. I knew a lot of stuff at a very deep level. I think it's Carl Menninger calls alcoholism a desperate attempt at self-treatment. And that's what it was for me. It was an attempt to treat the conflicts and the deep stresses that I just had no other way to treat. I described myself as somebody with a foot on the brake and the accelerator at the same time, dying to be noticed, but scared to death if I was called on. If I was called on at school, everything went out of my head, although I was a neurotic and I could channel a lot of energy and power into learning and and those kinds of things, to get approval, to get freedom is really what it was, because if you knew this stuff, they let you alone. But if called upon to share that, I couldn't get it. I couldn't reach it. I would stutter. I would just be flooded with embarrassment and separation, and it was anguish. I had such a sense of dread, especially foreign languages. French classes. I had Latin for 5 years and French for 5 years, and I think if they had thermocouples on me or blood pressure things, I'd have been off the chart. Just with fear that I would be called upon to recite or something in a foreign language. So anyway, you get a kind of a taste of what I was dealing with. And alcohol was an antidote for all that. For some reason, when I had my first drink, I used to squirm when people in AA said this, that they were alcoholic from their first drink. I used to say, my God, aren't they melodramatic? You know, because I thought an alcoholic was you're smashing your car, the last 7 seconds of your drinking. That's alcoholic. Anything earlier than that was feeling good. You know how we think in the beginning. But I really see clearly that I drank to change things. I drank therapeutically. The fact that I did, this I learned when I first came into AA, the fact that I did social things while I drank allowed me to convince myself that I was a social drinker. That I could walk and talk and dance and whatever with a drink in my hand. I thought that was social drinking. A friend of mine described early on in AA the difference between a social drinker and an alcoholic. He said, Frank, a social drinker will go to a dance, will go to a beach party, will go to a sporting activity or whatever, hold jobs and be married or whatever. And they may not have a drink. A drink is a minor extension of whatever the activity is. An alcoholic has a drink and another drink and another drink. And we just carry on the activities as long as we're able to. The activities of beach parties, dances, sporting events, marriages, jobs, whatever, as long as we're able to. And boy, I understood that, because I just did the rest of life as long as I was able to. Alcohol brought a spirit to my life. I mean, I really, even people with marginal amounts of alcohol knew it would produce a vitality in me. Across a crowded room, people would say, get Frank, at least in the early part of my drinking, get Frank a drink. And the fact that a drink was going to come to me, so it changed my body English. I mean, I had something to say. The exquisite pain came off my face, and I could partake in the social exchanges. I was the same. If you came to my house, before you got your galoshes off, I had a drink in your hand. And I don't know if it snows down here. Do you know what galoshes are? Overshoes. I don't know how far south I am. This is very mysterious. But can any of you understand me? I should have started off with. You're very generous. I mean, you seem to be quiet. I don't hear too many ashtrays falling off chairs and stuff. We're dozing off here. But the thought of a drink coming to one of us would calm me enough that I could remember your name and start the social exchange. That I could, and instinctively I self-selected people like myself, like all of us do. We find each other. We were talking a little about dinner. We find ourselves drinking, and we find ourselves sober, like-minded people. I don't know how that phenomenon happens, how we're able to do that, but we do that. And I certainly did that drinking. I was able to select unconsciously people who drank the way I did, unlimitedly. I never wanted to measure a drink, and if I went to your house and you produced a jigger and did one for you and one for me, Frank, and we waited and waited and waited for another one, I mean, I was crazy by then and never passed that way again. I liked it if you splashed it into my glass and threw it at me and said, Frank, I'm making your first one. After that, you help yourself. And here were bottles behind bottles. Then I knew we were going to be there a while. We were going to rest. We could be unhurried. I could listen to your story as long as I had a drink in my hand. I could be unhurried. I could listen. And I could get to a place psychically that I could not get to without drinking. You know, I even know it went very far as I could find a bar in the eastern end of Long Island in a blackout that I could never find sober. And I would say things in blackouts, sometimes nice things, sometimes vicious things that I would never say sober. And I could behave so I mean, that consciousness that I tried to get to brought a whole different behavioral and thinking and language and memories and to me that I did not have access to without alcohol. And I loved it for a large part of my adult drinking. I mean, I felt I had something worthy to say often, and somebody wanted to hear it. People would report that I was funny or whatever in the early parts of my drinking, and I savored that because I was never funny sober. I was always intense. You know, everything in a book review of Sylvia Plath, the reviewer describes Sylvia as kind of somebody who overvalued their own sorrows. And boy, did I fit in that category. I overvalued every sorrow I ever had. I would be brave and not talk about it, which paradoxically gave it more value, you know. Let's not go into that, you know, kind of stuff. The brave little soldier. Some others were like that, maybe. But that stuff had an incredible power in my life, that kind of thing, before I came to AA. And so anyway, you can sense, too, that alcohol did provide me with a life, I believe, that would be unlivable for me without alcohol. It certainly brought me to a level of meeting people and changed my consciousness of myself and other people. It brought harmony. Surprisingly, alcohol brought harmony to my life. I was so flooded with fear, I could never stop still long enough to complete tasks without a drink. Alcohol was an anchor for me. I could do my income tax if I had a bottle of liquor and ice and the cigarettes. I could sit still long enough to complete the task. Wherever it was, alcohol was like a magnetic field. You know, you have a magnet and some metal filings on it. The metal filings form a pattern around the magnet. You know, if you have paper on it, you shake the magnet up and the filings all rearrange themselves in the same kind of pattern. I was like that with alcohol. Wherever you took it, I went after it. You know, if you... True. If you took it to your kitchen, I was there, sitting on your stove or leaning on your refrigerator. And if you moved it to the garden, I went after it stepping on the barbecue or falling in the rhododendron. Always the shortest connection between me and the booze. I particularly like to help out. Here, let me do it. You know, let me fix them. Because on the way to fix your drink, I would freshen mine. You know, that kind of stuff. I really wanted an unlimited drink. One big unlimited drink. I didn't like to be interrupted all the time with running out and getting another drink. I just liked to freshen them a little bit. And I especially liked it after the people left the party. You know, the hardcore drinkers would kind of fall into the kitchen. Kitchens were holy places, and are holy places for me, because you had everything they didn't drink left. And you were also flying, and in a frame of mind, well, we better finish it up. You know, this stuff doesn't keep unless you finish it up. And the air, of course, is alive with meaning and concerns and exchanges of deep, important things at that hour. We were very close to it, whatever it was. Let's have one more drink and wrap it up. You know, that kind of stuff. And believed it with a passion and a conviction that I never felt at 9 o'clock in the morning in American industry. You know, it was always, oh God, you know, get through the morning till I was in, as I said, where I just went like the magnet. I went into advertising, pharmaceutical advertising. So I had unlimited access to pills, and I medicated my hangovers. I didn't know what that was I was doing. I always fancied myself a nervous person who needed something anyway. And as you know, part of the component, a big component to alcoholism, is keeping everything confused, including your life and those around you. So it's not too clear cause and effect, you know. And since I was troubled long before I started to drink, I always had that old memory to say it's the drinking that's holding me together. You know, if I didn't have the drinking, I really wouldn't be glued together at all. And in a way, that was true. I mean, that was part of the truth, because drinking did give me so much a belief in life and a conviction that I held on to the planet at least as long as I could to probably get to these rooms, because drinking produced hope in me. And I really didn't have a lot of hope in my life without alcohol. You know, we were reading the 7th step. Every time a step is read, I hear a different thing. And it talked about barrenness. And I really see how barren my life was without drinking during my adult life. I mean, even winning at life. You know, I didn't particularly get a lot of satisfaction. I ran the material world life race. I gathered things. I mean, I was a successful drinker. Alcohol allowed me to conform to people. It allowed me to people please. It allowed me to get to an area of knowledge and be able to produce it. That a lot of things, alcohol furnished me with an ability to dream, and in some weird, crazy, unconscious way, to take steps to achieve those dreams. So what was the paradox was, while I was sinking, I was also emerging into a world of creature comforts that I never dreamed of without drinking. I mean, I had a lifestyle. I moved to where I wanted to live in New York City, and then I left there and moved to California and got, all kinds of cars and houses and, stock programs from companies. And people adored me. I always, when newcomers talk about how much trouble we've had with the civilians out there, I never had that. People really intervened and supported me and saw my good when I couldn't. And I just look back and sigh, my God, how generous they were with this alcoholic. Because I'm not particularly generous with an active alcoholic. I tend to hear myself say, well, pull yourself together and, stop drinking and all that stuff. I don't have as much compassion yet as people showed me during my drinking. But I had many, many people who would intervene in my life and smooth the way for me, allow me to repair and get started again, particularly a couple that would get jobs for me. They would really believe in me. I was one of these things. I had some kind of crazy biological clock in me, and every 24 months I would jump up like a lemming and have to change things. Change where I live, change my job, change my personal relationships. I didn't know this till after I'd been sober for a while, and I did a job resume. And almost to the day, I changed jobs every 24 months. And then I began to get clear on the rest of my life, and almost in sync with those job changes were other changes. Places to live, I would run away, because in 24 months I had so contaminated the relationships that I was in. The relationships were so marred that the only thing I could do was to run. I was a runner. And yet I didn't see that, because I was running to more money or a better title or to live in California or to come back to a higher consciousness. I didn't see that I wasn't running to, I was running from. But that took me a while to clear up on a lot of that stuff. I've been slow to have the ability to calmly and fearlessly, as the literature talks about, to examine my life. I could always examine my life on the intellectual level. I could describe myself as my patient. When I came into AA, my first talks, it sounded like I was talking about my patient, I would tell you my respiration rate and my pulse rates and the generic names of the drugs I took. I mean, I was so separated from any kind of attachment to the real me, to the emotional me, which is only in recovery begun to emerge, that I really own me. I mean, this is me. This is real. That it's not some little container I carry around the planet. And that I really begin to kind of cherish the container. But that's taken a long time to come. I'm going to skip through some of the episodes of drinking. I drank in nice places and I drank in not so nice places. I committed some of the most generous acts in my life drinking, some of the most noble things, and also some of the most humiliating and degrading things in my life drinking. I always remind myself that alcohol made me generous and good. When I got sober, I got cheap and petty to a large extent. Alcohol allowed me to fashion a personality, a persona, that when I got sober just vanished. I was not as generous and as good as I was a lot of the time when I drank. But as happens in a progression of alcohol, I always remind myself that alcoholism isn't drinking when you want to drink. Alcoholism is drinking when you don't want to drink. When every cell in your body is saying, for God's sakes, Frank, don't get another drink, as you get up to make another drink, and another drink, and another drink. That's alcoholism. Alcoholism is drinking when there's no more relief in the drinking, that it doesn't bring you a second of forgetfulness or the ability to get that kind of relief from fears and worry. That's alcoholism. Alcoholism is pushing a loved one who you need in your life out of the way as they're screaming at you, you're not going to have another drink, are you, Frank? I've upset some of the world's nicest dinner parties and parties in general. And sometimes I was even conscious when I did it. And that really stung. That got my attention. Most of my alcoholism on joyously, I was in a blackout and unpresent for. But some of it I couldn't be unconscious for. I was there watching myself commit the humiliating acts over and over again. And that got my attention. I didn't mind the alcoholism I experienced. What stung me was the alcoholism you saw. I didn't mind being a drunk. I just didn't want to look like a lush, and that's what I looked. The public aspects, or what I consider the cosmetic effects of alcoholism, is what got my attention most. Not what I experienced, but what was seen. If somebody said, my God, he's a lush, that stung, and I was conscious for it, that stung me. Or if I got up from a bar stool and I would hit a wall on the way out, I got panicky. Or if I slurred a word, I would stop talking. Short of that, I was just so out of control. But shame is the biggest emotion I have. And that was true when I drank. That somehow within me was a conscience. Somehow was well within me that I couldn't quench, was a bias for good, and a bias for good conduct that I couldn't drown. And that was the strongest emotion, and that's probably what kept me alive with its power, and certainly probably propelled me into these rooms, and have kept me here. It's a curse, but it's also a gift. And I think I hear that in almost every other story. Those of us who survive alcoholism invariably have that. That somehow we just couldn't drink that feeling away, whatever it is, however it's described by us to us. Anyway, I always remind myself, I drank as long as I was able to. I didn't stop a second before I had to. And certainly out of merit, I didn't survive my alcoholism. I was flung into AA the same way that other alcoholics are flung into fires, into homicides or suicides, the way nature handles most other alcoholics. I just somehow was alive when I stopped drinking. A friend of mine said that. He said, Frank, every alcoholic stops drinking. It's nice to be alive when you stop. I just happened to be alive physically. I was physically alive when I stopped, but I wasn't emotionally alive or spiritually alive. I was pretty dead. I drank on a daily basis for 13 years, and most of those 13 years I drank in unlimited amounts. I didn't know I drank every day until I'd been sober a while. But I never counted beer. While I was drinking, beer wasn't even drinking. I thought you were giving your liver a rest, or wine. Somebody once told me, you know how we hold on to fragments of information, that beer even had vitamin B in it. And I just would imagine myself awash with all these happy nutrients. And except for wine sores, I never really, it took so much wine to do anything to me. And I took pills for 7 of those 13 years. And I never counted pills. I walked around like a little M&M factory. The onset of the action of pills are not instant. Some of you know this. Are not instant like they are with alcohol. You had to plan what mood you wanted to be in 20 minutes from now. And if you're not dealing with a lot of clarity to begin with, you're a mess. So I would have to take some of each, to kind of... my favorite was Ritalin. One of my favorites was Ritalin. I also took diuretics because I didn't want to look like a drunk, and I was a puffy, wine-sory drunk. My body was beginning not to be able to handle alcohol, which was my biggest... the only thing I thought I'd ever done well was drink. I was clumsy at every other thing in life. The only thing I thought I did well was drink. People would say in the early part of my drinking, let Frank drive. I would be shifting into second gear when everyone else wanted to go home, and at the end, of course, I'd lost that. I could be in big, big trouble with what I considered marginal amounts of drinking. That got my attention. I would just be in a rage or come out of a blackout and see the look of on the face of somebody I loved or felt tenderness toward or needed in my life, and see the shock, disbelief, the fear in their face, and wonder, my God, what had I done to provoke that? Because I always considered myself as kind of a brooding poet, maybe, but certainly a happy puppy-like drunk, and really what I'd become was a snarling, vicious, threatening creature. Anyway, one day it was over for me. It's the only way I can describe it. I hadn't worked for a year, and I remind myself how I handled that. I made sense on the telephone. If you didn't see me, I was okay. And if I timed it right. But I would make these telephone interviews, and I live on West 79th Street, and between me and the subway, unfortunately, was the Jolly Green Dublin House. So I would stop in the Dublin House just for a beer, just to kind of calm down a little bit and relax so I could go to the job interview. And I would be frozen to the stool. I wouldn't be drunk, I wouldn't be out of it, but I just couldn't move from that experience. I couldn't call to reschedule the thing. I just watched the clock go by the appointed time, knowing I needed the job. I hadn't paid I was remarking, I hadn't paid my rent. This is in New York, really a tough town. I hadn't paid my rent for 9 months. My landlord would write, please, Frank, clean this up. But I couldn't get past the Dublin House. And I would watch that opportunity, that door close. But anyway, on June 10th, 1970, it was over for me. And I called Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know where that idea came from or where the power came to act on it. To get those two things in the same moment is very rare for an alcoholic. Apparently in blackouts, I talked about the Menninger Clinic, I talked about Payne Whitney, I talked about, I've got to do something about this thing. but I never did anything about this thing. I knew I was an alcoholic, but I didn't know what it meant. I would read the Merck manual on alcoholism at great length, and I knew all the factual information of blood levels and tissue studies and all that stuff. But I guess I thought it was a disease. I didn't quarrel with that. But I thought I had, it was like psoriasis. And I had a mild to moderate case with an occasional flare-up. Didn't occur to me that my flare-ups happened every night. And usually in the same moment, I went from mild, moderate, to severe in the same hour to homicidal and suicidal. But anyway, I was to get clear on a lot of those things later on. But anyway, suddenly I found myself in AA. And that's got to be a miracle when you can come from one of the most destructive, self-destructive individuals, which scare me when I look back and think if anyone had watched my behavior on any kind of daily basis, they would say this guy is one of the most pronounced self-destructive people in life. I did beers just so I could understand her. And I went expecting some kind of, clinical setting, everybody in white smocks or something. And I don't know where I got that information, but there were beer cans in the elevator and cigarette butts all around. These funny little people, and the phones never stopped. In New York, they just have banks and banks of these funny little volunteers on the phone all the time, talking and giving advice. And she was waiting for her phone to ring. And she just talked to me, and she was doing the New York Post crossword. I was a person who did the New York Times Sunday crossword puzzle. I thought I did it. Usually I lost it, or lost the pencil and never did anything. And she gave me to get rid of me, she gave me the New York Post crossword puzzle to do. And it's full of questions like answers are required, like it, and ask, and see, and dog, and cat. And of course I couldn't do it. I mean, by the time I read the question and found the box to put the answer in, I'd forgotten the question. I'd done, and startled me. I had done so much damage to my central nervous system, I couldn't say what I wanted to say, and that humiliated me. It was like those cars, you have an old car and you put cheap gas in it, you turn it off and it still kinds of chug along for a long time after. That's the way my mouth would be. Would have a life of its own, talking all this trivia. Some others, especially if it were lying. It would go a long time on a lie. And most of the things I said were in that category because I had been so separated from the truth and I had lied so long that I was more comfortable. I probably would, under a test, tell a lie more easily than I would a truth. I was so separated from any kind of reality. But anyway, I stayed in AA custody, and I've adhered to AA. The same way if you some of you may think this isn't too nice to say, but if you take a bug and squish it with enough velocity against the wall, it will adhere to the wall. I adhered to AA in the same fashion. My alcoholism flung me in with enough velocity, and I came in on a hot June day, and they were not air-conditioned ballrooms. They were little smoky palaces. If you think this is smoky, my God. And they were metal chairs, and I stuck to the chair. And it's hard to leave a meeting with a chair and not be noticed. Even in AA, it's hard. Yeah. So I stayed. I didn't think it made much sense. I didn't think I was as bad as the others. That was a persistent one. And I always thought they were alarmists. They were seen drinking everywhere. And because I didn't see my drinking as particularly dangerous, when you live on the edge of death every second of your adult life, I was a drunken driver. You couldn't take the car keys away from me. I smoked in bed. I had apartment fires galore. My landlord started to bill me for the changing windows. When the the firemen would come out. They overreact in New York, and they squish all your windows out. You know, even if it's a minor thing, they just want to be noticed. And my answer, like every alcoholic, is to minimize the damage. Oh, it's not that bad. It's just a smoldering bureau. You know, like you always have smoldering bureaus in your bedroom. I remember one time I came out of a blackout. I had a Yamaha in California. Something you drinkers don't have a long life expectancy in a Yamaha. And I could never remember to put my foot down. You know, when you stopped it? I knew it, but I couldn't do it. You know? So every time it stopped, it would fall over with me. And I was very sensitive. I didn't mind it falling over terribly, but everybody noticed it, you know, at shopping centers and things. And one time it fell over, but it didn't stop. You know, it didn't turn off. So those things could kill a half a dozen people and not be scratched. Well, it dragged me around the shopping center, and I was all abrasions on one side of my thing, and I was down, and this lady stopped with a brand new Buick to take me to Palo Alto Hospital. I was bleeding, and she said, "Oh my God." And I said, "Oh, don't be alarmed." I said, "I'm a bleeder. I just bleed. It always looks worse than it is." And I was in and out of blackouts. I was screaming at I was afraid some little hack internist was going to sew me up. And I was screaming, I want to go to Switzerland to be treated, or flown to New York. You know, here's this important creature, barefooted, falling all over, and my face, I couldn't have it treated. Well, when I came to, I went home, and I had to go to the doctor's office to have the stitches removed, not to the hospital. And I went to the office, and he was a pediatrician. And there was all this little people furniture that I had to sit in while he took these out. And I was I was a clown all my life to prevent the awesomeness of the trouble I was in. I always had the funny lines. And after it was over, I said, "Don't you get a balloon and a lollipop?" And he said, "Frank, be careful." And I knew what he meant. You know, I knew what I was for a long time. A friend of mine describes alcoholism as an incredible express train. And every once in a while you see a local stop. And you begin the local stops are consciousness that it's alcohol doing it to you. I remember every once in a while that would flood me. That, my God, what are you doing? I remember I'd been unemployed, and this marvelous couple had set up a job interview for me, and I was supposed to go to their house. It was a Saturday night. I knew I had to be careful, so I just drank beer when I got up after, particularly binge. When I didn't have a job, I had no structure, so it was binge drinking all 24 hours a day. Whenever I was up, I was sucking on something. And I knew I had to be careful on this Saturday, so I started with beer. But I watched myself get into the hard stuff about 3 or 3:30 in the afternoon, and I screamed aloud to myself. I said, "Don't do it, Frank, don't do it," as I got up and made another drink and another one. Joyously, I didn't make it to their home that night. I just passed out. The worst thing would be that I would appear 2 and 3 hours late for a dinner party with somebody I'd met 6 seconds before. You know, so here the people didn't know whether I'd dead on the highway, should they hold dinner. They finally go ahead and eat this charred dinner, and then El Jerko appears with some other fool drunk out of his mind. I mean, that's the kind of craziness and humiliation I put other people through. Anyway, this person found himself in AA. And I didn't think much was wrong with me, as I said, but I was attracted to step meetings. And that's been a blessing. I made a step meeting in this one particular place. I made some others, but I never missed a Tuesday step meeting at Trafalgar for about 4.5 years. I don't think I missed many Tuesdays. And I'm really happy to report that it doesn't matter what frame of mind you enter AA in, and certainly none of us are honest. I wasn't, but the process itself clears up that. I believe AA is like gravity. It works whether you agree with it or whatever. If you drop the pencil, it falls. It doesn't matter if I understand it or like it or rage about it, the pencil drops. And the same is true with Alcoholics Anonymous and the principles here. I think they just work. And you can bring your anger, rage, you can bring your doubt. I always had doubt. I always knew that the rules of life never quite applied to me. I was exempt from the rules of life. I would tell you don't drink and drive. I would tell you don't take pills and drink. I knew all of the data, what happens to pills and drinks. I could never apply it to me. For some reason, I thought I was exempt from nutritional laws or those kinds of things. Alcoholics Anonymous has been more to me than a deliverance from alcoholism, an addiction to a chemical substance. I think God delivered me from my alcoholism. I just happened to be alive, as I said. But I needed a program to survive the violence of a recovery. You know, my recovery was every bit as violent as my alcoholism. For one thing, I was present for it. You know, I wasn't present for most of my drinking, but I had 5 senses reporting 100% of the data of my recovery, and I didn't like any of it. You know, I didn't like the fact that I didn't work and hadn't worked for a year because I was my jobs. It's the only ego thing I'd ever had. If you asked me to tell you something about myself, I sounded like my job resume. You know, then I worked for, then I did whatever. I was always externals. And I didn't have that when I entered AA. And I was humiliated. And I had done so much damage to my nervous system I couldn't speak properly. And that humiliated me, because I always prided myself on my ability to talk. I didn't have all the other toys I had that I felt were very important to my life. I couldn't make myself do what I wanted to do. I was really powerless, and that humiliated me. And I've grown more powerless in my recovery, in a funny way. I've had all of the things. Sometimes I think success and prosperity is more toxic than alcoholism is. You know, I can be flooded with my achievements. I can be as drunk and as intoxicated on successes in life. And the thing that keeps me alive is this program that detoxes my attitude. You know, AA isn't about not drinking, although most of the people who have not experienced, your friends, or can't believe drunks are up here not drinking. But people say, God, you've been sober quite a while, Frank, and you still go to those meetings? They think we sit around and not drink at our meetings, you know, that we watch each other, so at least during that hour we don't drink. I probably need that kind of watching. But I didn't know how to live. You know, the sadness of my drinking is not the carnage, was not the invisible carnage, but that so much of my life was unlived. I was at the prettiest places on this planet with some of the world's most attractive and gifted people, and I wasn't there. I was somehow under the influence of drugs, alcohol and other drugs, and all of those opportunities. And for whatever its pain, at least today I live a life, you know, and I've had that experience. And I prefer it that way. Recovery hasn't been easy. It never is. I mean, that's why the rooms aren't even more filled than they are now. I think recovery is a lot of sacrifice. There's a lot of swallowing and taking what we get. I had to watch every illusion that I felt certain about myself diminish and get crushed. I'm also happy to report I've had incredible things happen to me, like reconciliation with my family. I adore my family today and love them and applaud them for resisting me. I was a kind of alcoholic. I was good to them, but I was good to them to change them. You know, I changed where they lived. I changed how they dressed. I changed that kind of external thing about them. But I could never change them, and I applaud that because I think whatever their destiny is in life, they're true to it. And that's all I can be. I'm one of the people, I've always been blessed at Alcoholics Anonymous meetings too. I've always gotten they're group meditations for me. You know, whatever kind of neurotic drives and upsettedness I come to the meetings with, after a period of time, I just calm down. And I see my good, and I see the power that rescued me from my alcoholism is still available into my life today. That my recovery does have a life of its own, the same way my drinking had a life of its own. You know, it didn't matter what I drank, what kind of containers I drank out of, or with whom I drank. I drank in some of the prettiest places. Still, my alcoholism had a life of its own and took me where it was supposed to take me, down. And my recovery is just the reverse. Whatever my perceptions are of it, I might scream and rage about it and not be happy or cooperative with it, but it has a life of its own, and it will bring me to where I'm supposed to go. I also know that we have group depression meetings in Alcoholics Anonymous where you can go happy and cheerful on a sun-filled October day, and in 20 minutes there's no reason to go on. You know, that whatever happened to life and happiness. But most of them are the other way. I always get his name confused. It's either Lewis Thomas. I think it is Lewis Thomas. His two first names, but he was the director of medicine at Sloan Kettering, the cancer hospital in New York. And he wrote a book, Lies of a Cell, and he describes a beehive. And he's a biology watcher. And he says if you take one or two bees by themselves, they're lethargic and they will die. But if you put a bee in a hive with the other bees, there's an enormous amount of energy, and the hive has an intelligence and a purposefulness, and everybody has their jobs, and there's an incredible amount of energy and industry and information is exchanged, and that's the way Alcoholics Anonymous meetings are. If you go into your home group, I'm a people watcher too, the first person will sit over here, and the next person will sit over there, and the next one over there, and the next one over here. But then it'll begin to fill up the middle, and you can feel the tempo of the room pick up, and the information begin to be exchanged, and we begin to be pulled out of ourselves and into this community intelligence. And that's what has saved me, the community intelligence. Because I didn't lack, and I've never met an alcoholic who lacked from information. Most of us have too much information. We suffer from informational flooding. What I didn't have was an emotional calmness to apply the information. And that's what I get here. And I'm very blessed. I also work at the office, so if I'm particularly crazy, I can go to work and calm down, you know, because the work's a holy place. The environment is very permissive. I work with historical documents of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I see where in our collective history is an affirmation of our individual history. I see where the early part of recovery was as troublesome for us collectively as the early part of recovery is usually for most of us, because we have to begin seeing a world in a different way. And in the late 30s and 40s, the alcoholics had to begin to see life in their community in a different way. And that's affirming to watch. And I also see that the big dangers Alcoholics Anonymous faces today is success, is prosperity. You know, I can be very good when I'm not winning at life. Pain gets my attention, and I'm very close to my God when I'm in pain. But if I get a couple of bucks in my pocket, and I get a little racket going for me, I don't hear the voice of God. My own voice becomes so thunderous, and I begin to say, I know, and I can do, and I can whatever. And I lose that humility, and I begin to manage my life and yours. You know? And I not only can see what I'm doing wrong, and clearly, or not see it is probably more accurate, but I can see clearly what you're doing wrong and how you could fix it. And even if I don't have enough guts to say it, I can think it. You know, I can sit there in my silence and kind of control your life, or try to. Alcoholics Anonymous somehow diffuses all that self-destructive thought patterns that I have. My sickness is very intrinsic to my thinking system, and that's what I'm here to be treated for. And I'm not healed permanently once and for all from that thinking system, because left to my own devices, I have a penchant for that kind of crazy thinking, that kind of analytical approach to life. If I don't have a heavyweight component to tip me over into a positive way of looking at life. For example, I live very near Central Park, and in a very highly, as you know, polluted part of the world. It's nice to live so close to a park, and I take a bicycle to work. So, there are trees and plants and flowers and a quality of life that's very available to me in Central Park. But what I can do, if I'm in the wrong frame of mind, I count the broken benches and the knocked out street lamps. So by the time I get a mile or a mile and a half through the park, I have this long list for a letter I'm to comprise to the mayor and the park commissioner. And I haven't seen the flowers, or I haven't enjoyed the ride at all. I was collecting what's wrong. And I know I've got to pick up my meetings, and I've got to read more, and I've got to start chanting the Jesus prayer, just to tip me over into a bias of good, where I'll begin to see my good and yours. I've enjoyed being in your company, and I'm also glad I got Friday over so I can really relax and get on with the weekend. Thanks.
Thank you, Frank, for a wonderful message. And on behalf of the convention committee and all of us here, we would like to present you with this token of our appreciation.
They always wrap these well.